Connor here, and welcome to the Knuckles and Gloves podcast. I'm here with my dude, Aris Pina, who is, of course, a CompuBox operator and fellow just boxing and boxing history lover like myself. And we're doing a end of the year awards show, like just about a lot of people do, but it's pretty important. 2021 was a big year, man. It was a fun year. How you doing, man?
Doing really good, man. And like you said, dude, it was a really good year, really fun year, a lot of good fights, a lot of big things happened in the sport, as always. But yeah, this was considering how many fights and cancellations happened because there was a lot and a lot of disappointments. A lot of it was made up because there was some incredible fights, incredible action and drama involved. You know, if you're a part of boxing, you gotta take both sides.
Yeah, I honestly was like, I'm not gonna lie, dude. It's easy to get down, get kind of like doom and gloom or whatever you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
because the pandemic messed a lot of stuff up. And on the outset of 2021, it looked like a lot of stuff was ruined or off, wasn't going to happen, et cetera, et cetera. The quarantines for this and that were
You're
messed
still in
up.
the bubble at the beginning of 2021, correct?
I think so. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, because there was that whole like winter surge or whatever.
Mhm.
And in any case, yeah, dude, it looked bad, but there were a number of really high level fights, entertaining fights, a number of fighters who really came through.
Yeah, man. There was a lot of big upsets, unexpected rises to contendership guys who made a complete turn in a good way that just rose. And now some of the top names in the sport, when at the beginning of the year, they were still kind of an obscurity. Other fighters who kind of resurrected their careers when you thought they had their last swan song. And we, put us solidified, I guess, a big drama, chapter in the heavyweight division as well. Also, too, we crowned an undisputed champion in a division that never had one. So lots of things did happen.
Yeah, some pretty cool stuff. There was, for as much as you and I guess we're not heavy against alphabet belts or anything. We don't really preach about it the way that
I
some
mean,
others do,
like
but
for it's funny to think now with the alphabets that like I was a kid when I first got into sport, and obviously the alphabets were like large and in charge, but there was only three of them that were like taken into consideration seriously, and the WBO was still kind of like on the fringes. But everybody back then, at least the old timers and other people that had been around the sport for decades before that, were always complaining there's too many sanctioning bodies, too much stuff, get rid of these alphabet things. We need the 8 divisions back, yada, yada, yada. And here we are now at the end of 2021, about to go into 2022, and we have more sanctioning bodies. And not only that, within the belts, multiple champions of each division, all kind. It's more wild than ever and more confusing than ever to be a boxing fan. So like I'd love to like wonder if you could transplant those old timers from back in the 90s or 80s even, and who may not be around today, and put them in today's era and just see their heads explode when they realize what was going on.
see how many opportunities they would have to be a champion, basically.
I mean, well, just like these guys that would go there and they would see this, and like, I mean, like the writers and the fans and others who would always complaining and just be like, "What the hell's going? I can't take this. We need to go back." If they came today and they were, if they were transplanted in today's world, they would just lose their goddamn, excuse me, they'd lose their minds.
Yeah,
I mean, like
for
absolutely
sure.
lose their shit completely. There's no way they wouldn't because it's like, um, yeah, man. In today's world of boxing, dude, it's so confusing to be a champion. Lightweight division's perfect example. With the WBC, you saw that press release that Suleiman came out with the other day, where he said David Haney's champion, but also Cambosis is our champion. We're proud of them both. And then he kind of went on some weird tangent, but none of it made any sense. So that's where we're at. That's basically that sums up boxing as a whole right
Yeah, basically just a bunch of nonsense. So it's
now. Just
kind of like
concentrate on the fights. Concentrate on the fights. Concentrate on the fighters.
exactly,
Don't worry about the belts and
we
who's
don't
that
come out
designated.
against the belts the way that a lot of people do, but we obviously don't rely on them the way that a lot of people do as well. But it's funny to then also kind of turn around and say, oh, well, such and such is undisputed, but also such and such. And it's like, well, then you have to pay some attention if you're going to be talking about undisputed or giving that any sort of credence or assigning that any sort of relevance and being undisputed. Point is, there were a lot of accomplishments, a lot of cool accomplishments this year, And thankfully, a number of fighters and fights came through to kind of salvage the year and then some. It was a good year. There were a lot of unexpected things and mostly unexpectedly good things. So I guess that's what it's all about, is celebrating 2021. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, man. And with that being said, I guess who was your fighter of the year?
Man, I honestly think it's going to be between two fighters, in my opinion, or at least especially from what I've seen from a lot of people whose opinions I would value and whose opinions I trust. It's going to be between Alexander Usyk and Canelo Alvarez.
I think that's the consensus for everybody. That's mine too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think that there's an argument to be made that when things happen at heavyweight, they tend to be a little bit more important, right or wrong, better or worse. That's just kind of how it happens. But for me, Canelo Alvarez unifying and becoming quote unquote undisputed, however you want to, however much worth you want to assign that, at 168 pounds, that's pretty big. And also finding a way to be as active as he was,
that's huge,
is big.
Huge.
I mean, it's almost kind of dumb that we've gotten to the point where it's like, well, if you fight 4 times, you're in. I mean, it's kind of stupid that we've gotten to that point.
That's how Oscar won his fighter of the year, I think, from fighting 5 times back in the late 90s.
It's just and I think that this if we talk about prospect of the year, that'll kind of swing back to that as well. But the point is, being active is big, but it was also who he was active against. He was active against fighters who were considered top at 168 pounds, really only left one stone unturned and might not be unturned for that long. So, I mean, I think that that's just in and of itself overall a bigger accomplishment. Had Alexander Usyk defeated Tyson Fury, that I think we'd be having a different discussion, but he didn't. So
I mean, when it comes to the heavyweights, you're totally correct, because there's been other times in the past too where a fighter just, all he had to do was fight either once or twice that year, and if it was a big enough win at the heavyweight division, that automatically catapulted them to being fighter of the year. Because it does, it holds it. It's, whether it's warranted or not, major victories at heavyweight are held to a higher standard just because of how the heavyweight division has been viewed in history and just over the years. Heavyweight champion is like the main dude. So and Usyk, from coming up from cruiserweight, completely wiping out that division, moving up to heavyweight, and his first 2 fights in this division, people were questioning maybe how he was going to fare at the elite level, because it looked like he struggled in spots, especially in the Chisora fight. So, but no, man, he put on an absolute masterclass against Joshua, and a lot of experts were correct in that. They picked Usyk to win. And it was one of those fights that like Usyk really just put it together. And then afterwards, what made it even kind of scary was that the fact of the matter was that, like, after the fight, he goes, "You haven't even seen my best yet," and you got the sense that you really haven't. He pushed himself. He put himself in a gear, but you can tell he didn't have to push himself to like that top level gear where he really had to put everything together. Like he was just, he still was enough in control that he was able to control Joshua the way he did. And it was a beautiful performance. It solidified himself as probably the best boxer in the division, aside from Fury being, the top dog. And the big fight that is to be made now is Fury and Usyk, I would say, for next year. I mean, whether it can come together or not is a whole other issue. You know how that goes, but that's the fight to be made right now. What looks like it's going to happen is that Usyk is probably going to go into a rematch with Joshua, which I think we both said that was probably going to happen that first time we discussed this. But Usyk to put himself there, man. He's not only did he put himself at the top of the heavyweight division, he put himself at the cusp of maybe being, potentially the best fighter in the world. If anything, he's in the top 3. So yeah, man, that's a hell of a year just off of one major victory like that. And Canelo, like we mentioned, same thing, man. Activity is key, especially for guys at that top level who are considered the elite in the world. Activity is not one of their strong suits. It hasn't been for a couple of decades now, not since the days of De La Hoya and James Toney and others, where the top elite fighters very, very active like that. And people were criticizing Canelo's first fight of the year against Yildirim, but that was a stay busy fight. He had deserved that, and if anything, that's good that he was still doing that, because that's something that doesn't happen, very often with elite fighters. You know what I mean? When's the last time you saw Floyd Mayweather take a stay busy fight when he was active, or any other top fighters like that? Errol Spence or any of these guys. There's no such thing as a stay busy fight like that. And Canelo did that. He expectedly blew him out, but like you said, his next two opponents after that were the top guys in the division, the ones that people have been clamoring for him to fight, the ones that guys said he was going to have a lot of issues with, and more or less he beat the hell out of him. He had a little bit of trouble here and there, but they were competitive fights. They weren't like complete blowouts, but at the end of the day, he proved his dominance, and he proved himself to be the number one in the world. So yeah, absolutely, man. Canelo is definitely the best in the considering everything that happened in 21. He had some tough competition, but heads and shoulders, he should be the best considered fighter of the year.
Yeah, I think even if you go back even just a couple weeks into 2020 and you add that in, which is obviously unfair, but I mean I don't know, maybe it is a little fair too, because you're generally not going to consider that for end of the year awards, something that happens in the last week or so of the year. But regardless, even if you just go back a week or so into 2020, he defeated Callum Smith, and I mean, beat the hell out of Callum Smith. So yeah. I mean, that's another kind of feather in his cap, as it were. And I think that the unfortunate part with that win, especially, is that the 2020 being hindsight type of thing, is that many people have said, well, yeah, he looked like shit against John Ryder, which he did. He probably should not have won that fight. But before that, looked really good. Pretty much that fight aside, looked really good at 168 pounds and was considered, if not
the
top
he was
dog.
considered a major threat to Canelo. Everyone on Twitter.
No question.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even in terms of size and style, I thought that there would potentially be a big problem there. And he wound up not being a problem whatsoever. He walked straight through him. That was what was shocking. And so the fact that he's handling these fighters like he is, I think, is probably that's a big portion of the dominance and a big portion of this kind of fighter of the year push that I agree with. So, I mean, I think that if Alexander Usyk had another strong win on his ledger, he'd have a much better argument, but he doesn't. And I get it. It's not totally his fault, but regardless of whose fault it is, Canelo's the one who stayed busy. Canelo was the one who drove so much interest in sub heavyweight boxing in 2021. It's huge.
Yeah, and there's no question he's the biggest star in the sport, by far. Even casual fans or people that are not really fans of boxing know the name of Canelo Alvarez. So yeah, he pushed the name, like, besides the heavyweight division, he's just, like you said, he's kind of pushed it everywhere. So yeah,
and sorry to interject, but people are gonna say, well, AJ can sell out as such and such in the UK, or Tyson Fury
can, for sure.
And yeah, there's no argument for that. But that's also a different, not to make excuses, but it's a different environment, dude. It's a different type of enthusiasm for boxing, and a different, like, I don't want to say anything wrong or anything disparaging to the UK in their boxing scene at all, so I'm not going to. But I just think that it's different, and they're heavyweights, which is a big part of this. But Canelo is just massive, dude.
No, man, he has that type of appeal where it's almost rival, not quite there, in my opinion, but rivaling, make comparisons, I guess, to like De La Hoya in the 90s for popularity. You know what I mean? Like overall becoming like a crossover type, crossover star.
And the whole, I think one of the things the establishment and kind of pundits like to say is, well, you need to learn English if you're going to be successful. And I don't really even know how true that totally is, number one.
I was just going to mention that, but yeah, he, as fluent as he is now, the way he speaks.
Yeah, and now he speaks great, dude. He could hurl motherfuckers like, well, yeah. except for the one exception where he took it literally. He took motherfucker literally.
Yeah, one time, even though he was hurling it a bunch of times over and over to everybody else. One time it gets hit back to him and he takes it literally.
Yeah, that was unfortunate. So maybe he gets knocked down a peg, but he still gets fighter of the year. I don't know. Maybe that actually pushes that actually helps his case.
It's just
Given,
hilarious that like he throws it around to other people. That wasn't the first time we've heard him say it. You know what I mean? Because he obviously said it to Andre. I'm sure he said it before to others. And then and then finally someone says it back to him, and then he just kind of he's like, "Wait a minute, you can't say that. That's about my mom."
yeah, that's my mother. Yeah, wait, have I saying that the whole time? Yeah, I don't know though. Maybe that gives him a little extra clout, given Caleb Plant that two piece. Didn't land
And he
clean, but
did
it was good stuff, man.
slap him up and then finish him in the ring. Yeah, there's no way. Canelo is the top dog in fighter of the year and the best fighter pound for pound in the world.
And that fight, actually, a couple of Canelo fights, the Saunders fight and the Plant fight, both produce some serious meme worthy material too. So I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
like, I don't know, that doesn't count in his favor officially, but it's pretty good.
And
Um,
it's just, like the way he was, it wasn't just like close decisions that he won or anything like that. It was like dominating fights. He potentially ended Billy Joe Saunders' career. We're not sure if he's still going to be able to come back from that eye injury because that was a ghastly injury that he suffered.
yeah,
Doctors were saying that was one of the worst ones they'd ever seen. Like his eye socket was shattered. So you go from there, and then also excuse me, not Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant. After he suffered, even though it wasn't like it was an extended beatdown he took. Like he took an extended beatdown slowly throughout the fight, kind of like what Canelo usually dishes out to different opponents. But as the rounds went on and it got more and more pronounced, yeah, man, he took quite a bit until he was completely finished. So we'll see how he's gonna come back from that. Because near the end, he took some good punishment. You know what I mean? So Canelo put an exclamation mark on his performances. That too solidified him as fighter of the year.
and it also kind of weeded out the dumbasses who had Saunders and Plant ahead in the scoring, respectively. It kind of singled, but the fights kind of singled them out. No,
Yeah, there was a few people I remember that were saying that. I think Plant's ahead right now. Oh, Saunders, I think he's winning him. He's outboxing Canelo. Really? All of a sudden, as that's being said,
yeah, it was like almost on the level of I'm gonna let him out the cage. I'm gonna let him out
oh
the
yeah,
cage right
yeah.
now.
Well, let him out cage.
Boom.
Let him out cage. Bow.
Yeah, almost as good as that. Almost. Now Canelo, he generated some serious interest, and that's not to say he was the only entity or only fighter or group of fighters or whatever that did, but he definitely kind of took the idea that he's carrying the torch or whatever for boxing. He took it, ran with it. He's done well. He's done what he's supposed to do. And he kind of went above and beyond, I think, what was expected of him in 2021. So for that reason,
Well,
I
for
think you
sure,
got to hand it to him.
easily, easily.
So let's say what was your fight of the year then, dude? Because there were actually a surprising amount of
Oh yeah,
really
man, there were a ton of awesome fights this year. Honestly, I have to say, there's probably it was a close one. It was either between it went back and forth between Fury Wilder and Chocolatito against Estrada, but I gotta say Fury
yeah.
Wilder. So at the end of the day, like, and not to say that it was Foreman Lyle the entire fight, but like there were just when there was drama, there was incredible drama in that. And when people thought beforehand, oh yeah, Wilder still had a puncher's chance, but I think everyone went in with thinking that Fury was still just gonna, after what he did in the second fight, the way Wilder had, how fragile his mind seemed and the way everything had been going about him. Even though he was training with Malik Scott, I think the general consensus still was that Fury would still kind of walk through him. Maybe it would take a couple of more rounds, but just more or less the same thing that we saw in the second fight. And when it came close to that, after the first couple of rounds, I think what was it, Fury, when he dropped him to round 3, it kind of looked like a mere formality after that. But that's when all the drama started, clearly, the next round. And that drama, the hysterics, man, I lost my voice yelling at the TV. I think everybody else was going through the same type of shit. Like, there was something, heavyweight boxing is something else, man. Like, when it gets awesome and exciting and there's drama involved and this dude's flopping around and getting dropped and back and forth with some wild haymakers, and all it takes is one punch before either guy to win, there's nothing quite like it. So with that, all that, and considering the implications, everything that this fight represented, the Fury being champion and finally, trying to conclude this trilogy with Wilder, with all the controversy I say with in quotations. I mean, that was all insinuated by Wilder, but like all the stuff, all the drama that was going on beforehand, this was, everything, build it up. This was it.
I agree, dude. You know, Juan Francisco Estrada versus Chocolatito, the rematch was so good. The action was sustained. There was just like combination punching in every round. It was a clinic on inside fighting from both fighters at different times. Both guys seemed hurt or wobbled at different times. And if you pick that for your fight of the year, no argument, no problem, all good. Yeah. I think that it's got to be. So, I mean, just I guess we've already kind of picked one award here, and we're about to pick the other one. But I guess for me, a lot of this type of end of the year awards and voting and stuff like that comes down to what level did this take place on? Because obviously, dude, we've seen knockouts and fights and stuff like that the last year or two that are just like some of the most brutal shit you've ever seen in your life. But it wasn't for a world title, or it wasn't world class level, or it was like sloppy as shit, or it was like, yeah, dude got blasted out of the ring or something like that, but he fucking sucked and the other guy was good, or you know what I mean? Like it's what level did this take place on? And if you look at that, I mean, there's only a couple of fights that happened that were like world class this year that were that good, in my opinion. You have obviously Fury Wilder 3, like you said, Estrada Chocolatito 2, like you said. Probably a lot of people are going to say that Gervonta Davis versus Isaac Cruz should be up there. I think that's probably kind of toward the top of the middle group. You know what I mean? But
I'm not sure.
But it was good.
It was a very good fight, especially because it was near the end of the year.
Yes, it's going to be fresh in people's minds.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and so people are going to be thinking about that. But I thought that Fulton Figueroa was a better fight than that. Jermell Charlo versus Brian Castano was a better fight than that. So I think that those four are probably.
I can agree with that.
Those four are probably closer to like the top of the heap. And of those four, the two separate ones obviously are Estrada Chocolatito 2 and Fury Wilder 3. And of those two, kind of narrowing this down here, I'm going to go with Fury Wilder 3. Because even though the action was sustained between the little guys, it was like the moments of drama between Fury and Wilder were like heart-stopping shit. Like, oh my god, like no, that can't happen.
Comparing it to Ali Frazier and stuff like.
I mean, and on there's a tendency to do that shit in the moment. And then there's like a tendency to backlash against that and say, no fucking way. It doesn't hold up to Frazier Ali. It doesn't hold up to Foreman Lyle. And I mean, when you look back though, and then you watch them back to back, like they're both really, really good. I don't think that the comparisons are really that off. Obviously.
No, especially with that third fight. That third fight is as good. That's one of the best ones you'll see. You got to go back almost to like, Burt Cooper, Michael Moore type style or something like that to find something as wild in the exchanges and as good.
And people are talking about like, oh, look how sloppy it was. Dude, look at some of the best heavyweight fights, man. And I used this example right in the aftermath of the fight when we talked about it because it was so great. But I used this example of Dempsey Firpo where people are talking about that shit and it's been 100 years, dude. People are still talking about it, but if you go watch this fight, it's one of the sloppiest things you've ever seen. They're like wrestling around. Dempsey gets pushed through the ropes and kind of punched. But like, it's
Ring Magazine rated it, I think, like the number 3 greatest title fight across all divisions, by the way. Just heavyweight of all time.
And I'm not trying to be a hater.
When they did that rankings in the late 90s, I think it was, or something.
So. Yeah, I'm not trying to be a hater. Like, it's fun. Don't get me wrong, but it's kind of like pixelated. I mean,
Firpo gets dropped like over a dozen times, and then that one punch. Well, he dropped Dempsey twice, but
some of them aren't clean because he's just like falling over. He's so exhausted, a round and a half into the fight. I mean, so don't get me wrong, dude. It's a good fight, but all I'm saying is that like it's sloppy as shit.
Well, here's another more current example. everybody loves Derek Jefferson, Maurice Harris. I love Derek Jefferson, Maurice Harris. I mean, if you watch
trading sloppy knockdowns.
That was the sloppiest shit you'd ever see, especially from Jefferson. Harris was a very good boxer, so I'm not going to knock him on that. But like Jefferson was sloppy as all hell. That knockout that he hit him with was like one of the wild haymaker drunk punches that someone that would, in a back alley brawl, he just type. He was out.
Yeah, he like ran into it. Yeah, it wasn't like he didn't set nothing up. He just ran into it, and he didn't see it coming.
It was basically if he missed that punch, one more was going to knock him completely over, and he was going to be cooked. That's where it was. But no, Harris ended up walking into it and flattened him. And that's what, Derek Jefferson, I love you, but go back and watch that. There's nothing, there's no high level like chess going on in that fight. It's heavyweights.
And that's the funny thing too, is that the other heavyweight fight on that card, Oleg Maskaev versus Hasim Rahman won. Those were the same night. So there's, knockout of the year contenders back to back, but both fights were sloppy as shit leading up to that. And people are like, oh, that's got to be crazy. Yeah, it kind of was good knockouts, but the fights were pretty sloppy.
I mean, another wild brawl from that same era was Hasim Rahman, Corey Sanders.
Yep.
Think about that. Like both guys, it's a little bit. I'm not gonna say that was like complete sloppy everything. Like there was definitely some skill involved in that, especially with Sanders being tricky with his quickness and everything. Yeah. But like, still, when those exchanges start, it goes for any type, almost. And especially as you get more modern, any type of like when there's major exchanges going on with heavyweights, you're not going to be seeing these guys trying to do the Mayweather slipping and sliding and everything, like countering and James Toney, Mike McCallum type exchanges over there. Like they're going to go in, they're going to be trading back and forth, and that's what people love about heavyweights. They brawl.
Yeah, it's some sort of pipe dream that people have invented in their head, like all of these like super skilled heavyweights that like, man, some of the great Holmes Norton. Like I'm not saying that it was unskilled. That's not even remotely what I'm saying.
There was tons of, especially early on. But if you watch the last round and both guys are dead exhausted.
Yeah. It's one of the greatest rounds, and they're just bop, 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 just
last
smacking
30
at
seconds,
each other.
They stand toe to toe and they just swing haymakers at each other.
Yeah. And that's what was great. You know what I mean?
Awesome. Yeah.
So yeah, it's this kind of whatever it is, it's just they're not going to be happy. Let's just kind of boil it down to that.
That was definitely, like you said, man, you hit all the points. That's the fight of the year. And
I think so, yeah. But like we said, there were a lot of really good fights, and a lot of really good fights that weren't heavyweight fights this year in 2021.
Tons of them. So.
Yeah, I was going to say even Shannon Courtney versus Ebony Bridges. That was another fight that was a lot of fun. It was back and forth. Both of them wound up with their faces, especially Ebony Bridges, looking like hell. That's always fun when one fighter winds up looking like they got put through a meat grinder. But yeah, there was a lot of fun scraps this year, man. But the big boys, when the big boys get it right, it's really tough to beat.
Always, man. You can't. It's just the drama that it produces, everything, all the attributes to it. You can't beat that. And I don't know. I can't wait to see. With that being said, I can't wait to see what's going to happen in 2022 with Wilder and Fury. Fury hopefully looks like he's going through his own issues, I guess, with trying to figure out a fight with Dillian White, which obviously you knew that would be a headache.
Man, I'm just gonna go ahead and I guess do some self-referential shit here, but I interviewed Otto Wallen a little while back on the show, and I'm trying to get back into doing more interviews. It's just kind of like, dude, I'm not about to start bugging people at the end of the year and the holiday season. But regardless, I interviewed Otto Wallen, who talked about the Dillian White fight. Dillian White pulls out with his whatever injury, shoulder injury or whatever, immediately starts negotiating with Fury, which is pretty much what a lot of people called and thought would happen. And so now Otto Wallen is left out in the dust, and they haven't even made the fucking Fury White fight, dude. Holy shit.
What a shit show. I don't get into negotiations because I don't care. But like I was reading, can't hide from it on Twitter. But like someone posted somewhere something about, I guess, White is demanding a certain amount of money or something like that. And that's what's going on. I don't, who knows? But like, whatever it may be, I couldn't give a shit about White. So like whatever happens, I hope Fury stays active and has a significant fight that ends against Usyk or something like that. Because I'm pretty sure Usyk will beat Joshua in a rematch. And if that happens, my dream fights for the division involve Wilder because I think he's awesome, in terms of excitement. So Wilder against either Andy Ruiz or Joshua would be absolutely ideal.
Yeah, that AJ Wilder fight's still appealing, dude. There's still nothing
Dude,
wrong with
oh my
that
God,
fight.
you do that. I don't care if those guys can lose multiple times. I just want to see them fight once because it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people put emphasis on like, well, we could have seen it when they were undefeated, and whatever. That's fine. That would have been cool, I guess. But I don't really care so much about that. Just the style clash would be fun. It would be fun,
It
and I
would be.
mean,
It would be a lot of fun, but hopefully it doesn't like wait too long that it happens way
that's
after the
true.
expiration date. Like
That's
a
true.
fight that doesn't get mentioned anymore, Roy Jones, Felix Trinidad.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
that's what I'm saying. That
well.
was more like a dream fight because like they weren't really in the same division, but like you know what I mean. But when it finally happened,
Had
I
Bernard
mean, you guys are
Hopkins
in the
not
same division. I know there's so many politics, especially with Eddie Hearn and the PBC and the way they kind of operate and everything, but like it has to happen, man. I hope so. That would be Joshua has that type of style that it's not like Fury where he's gonna give the guy fits. Like he's so much more stationary that he's gonna get clipped at some point. Like there's no way
yeah,
Wilder's not gonna land some wild haymaker or at least straight right that's gonna bomb him and drop him hard.
yeah,
And at that point,
he couldn't get away from some of the shots that Usyk was throwing. And
oh
I mean,
no, yeah.
you got to give it to him because he's tough. He hasn't gotten laid out even against Ruiz. He got up, he didn't give the answers the ref wanted, I guess, but regardless, he's clearly proven that he's tough. He's just I think that what we're seeing with AJ and is what we're seeing with a lot of bigger heavyweights is that they're kind of stiff. They're not nearly as they might be very athletic, but there's a massive difference between being athletic and being good at boxing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, AJ has an incredible physique. Like the dude's like a weightlifter and shit. But some of the best fighters you've ever seen don't have physiques like that. Like they might not have like a really well. Again, I said this shit on the last show. I'm not trying to be like Mr. Fitness expert here, bro. But I mean, like, a lot of the best fighters you've ever seen don't have like balanced bodybuilding physiques like that. And I think that that's what we see with a lot of heavyweights who come who get started in boxing a little later than a lot of other fighters, and
Yeah.
especially heavyweights who started in another sport. Like Michael Grant is always going to be like one of the prime examples because he started in football and basketball and then moved his way to boxing like in college or after college or some shit. And it was like you can see that in the style of a lot of these fighters. I don't want to get too far away from this, but regardless, yeah, same thing with AJ. You can see that he's extremely athletic. He knows what he's doing and what he wants to do, but there's a difference between being a good athlete and being an instinctual fighter, kind of having to think in there. And that second or so, whatever it is, leads to AJ getting fucking tagged, man. And but that also makes for
It
fun
is, man.
fights.
That's the thing with AJ. He is a good boxer. He has very good skills, and it's brought him this far already in boxing. But like you said, man, he overthinks a lot too. And when things aren't going his way, the way he's like asking his trainer stuff like that, what should I do next? What's gonna work against him? How do you think that is yeah.
You can see him thinking in there, and that ain't gonna cut it at
He's
the.
not a guy that's like, can quickly just like adapt to a new plan and try to adjust and go through that like someone like Fury can. Like you saw the way Fury adjusted, especially after getting absolutely concussed by Wilder, and he thought it might be over. I thought it was going to be over that round. And then like he was able because he has Larry Holmes recuperative powers, like I said, and can think his way through these things and just know how to like get himself back into a fight. That's what he ended up doing. And Joshua is not the person that can do something like that. I don't think mentally. So that's what's just going to make things even more awesome with Wilder. That will be your true Foreman Lyle, possibly.
I think it could be a lot of fun, dude.
Yeah.
In 2022, we're kind of in a weird spot with the pandemic and stuff like that. And so I have no idea what's going to happen. But that's what we thought last year, too. We were kind of like, I don't know. It's going to be 2021. It wound up being kind of awesome. So, for the fight of the year, then, if we end with an outstanding knockout, really, what was your knockout of the year? What do you think was the best
There
knockout
was some
of the year?
knockouts this year, man. but probably overall, again, I'm probably just going with a consensus here, but you got to go for me. Burchell getting absolutely splattered against Oscar Valdez at the beginning of the year.
Whew.
That was such a, and I think that was in the was that in that was in front of a big crowd, wasn't it? No, or just like a very sparse crowd, one of those.
I think it was a small crowd. Yeah, I think it was
Because
minimal.
yeah, because that like accentuated the knockout. You know what I mean?
There's
When
just
you heard the way
something.
he just kind of pow pow and then just falling flat unconscious on your face, the way you just you
It's one of those knockouts where like they're just going in that direction, almost as if like yeah, there's just nothing stopping them, just
absolutely
pure
not. When you
dropping.
get face planted like that, you don't get up from that. I don't care. I've never seen a fighter ever get up from that just normally and just keep on continuing. Doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's like there's been a handful of times where shit like that maybe kind of happens, but like not quite like that. And that
No, when you
was
plant and you just nose first and you just nah.
yeah,
That
no,
was
that was
brutal.
bad. And I think that like even I uh I kind of was a guest co-host or whatever on the last round the other week, and we talked about knockout of the year. And I think I even picked Fury Wilder 3 as knockout of the year, but then after thinking about it and after kind of like looking over some, dude, that was a great knockout. Don't get me wrong, but it was also kind of like it was like kind of going in that direction already.
Yeah,
Like
man, that was like the stages. That was like summing it up at the end. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
there was not it yeah, it was a great knockout. I'm not going to talk it down. But
Completely not. I mean, it was very dramatic too. That like put the exclamation point on a great wild brawl, but
yeah, it was
Wilder
that
was
was
completely
kind of
respected.
it was incredible. But Oscar Valdez versus Miguel Burchelt was more like just kind of emphatic, shocking, out of nowhere, and like, oh my God.
Yes,
Like
completely.
you're worried for this guy for a couple minutes here. Like you gotta shut up for a minute and just kind of wait and see if everybody's okay.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And especially because you're not used to seeing Miguel Burchelt like that. So that was I think that we've already seen
He was the
Deontay
favorite
Wilder.
in that fight, wasn't he?
What's that?
He was the favorite in that fight.
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm not positive, but I think so. Well, I thought that he was, if not going to win, I didn't think he was going to get knocked out. I definitely didn't think he was going to get knocked out. So I think that the shock factor also plays into it a lot, dude. So I think I'd probably change my pick from over there for here and say, yeah, I agree with you, dude. Vasquez
Also,
Burchelt
too,
was
man. I mean, but
brutal,
again, this was the year of like some ridiculous knockouts.
brutal.
Nonito Donaire made a tremendous comeback and scored a couple of highlight reel victories, especially his one over Nordano Bali.
Yeah,
Um,
Ubali knockout was
vicious, man. And it was awesome too because that was a fight that a lot of people thought, considering the war Donaire was coming off of with the monster, that you had to wonder, how much they have left, especially at that age. And Obali was, definitely not no cheese champion or nothing like that. Dude was a legit tough guy, very highly skilled, long time champion for a minute. Had a lot of credentials under his belt, and he was built. If you see Obali, like his back and everything, like he's a really well built guy. And Donaire just splattered him.
you can't let Nonito Donaire get his paws on you, dude. You just
No,
can't
man,
do it.
that's it. I don't care. Donaire's gonna be 89 years old in a facility somewhere in his wheelchair, still knocking guys out with a left hook if they get too close to him.
You can't let him touch you.
Nah, absolutely not. That's it. That quick trigger hook. And Connor Ben's knockout was really eye popping near the end of the over here against Algeria.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. Poor
Yeah,
Algeria.
that was a vicious one. Also, too, Gabe Rosado's very, very surprising KO over Beck the Bully.
Yeah, it was Bektamir Melikuziev.
Yep.
Yep, Beck the Bully. That was pretty good too, and especially I think that literally like it was like 15 seconds before it happened, I tweeted, "Yeah, Gabe Rosado is not gonna be able to knock this guy out, so his best hope is blah, blah, blah." And then it was like thump, and I was like, okay,
I mean, it did look like all hope was going to be like lost on him early on when he got dropped with a body shot. Like he was staying competitive because as he always does, because He's a pro's pro.
Yeah.
But um
I was more happy that he got the knockout than sad that I made a shitty call a moment before,
for
because that
sure.
was crazy. Because well, I honestly didn't. That was part of the shock factor, and that also was part of it. Like that, it was Beck the Bully is just even by nickname. He's got the reputation. He's kind of up and coming.
Oh, and
Gabe,
he was scheduled to fight Kovalev, and everyone thought he was going to steamroll Kovalev before the Rosado fight ended up happening. So
Gabe Rosado, the perennial like loser or opponent,
gatekeeper, yeah,
yeah, sparring partner, whatever you want to call him. He's been called all of these things. So for him to step up and get that knockout was
he
pretty
had a hell
cool.
of a year too because of that, for sure.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. And what else? Mark Magsayo over Julio Ceja.
Yep.
Man, dude, I even saw a couple people. I don't think they very seriously chose it, but Jake Paul's knockout of Tyron Woodley.
It
I
was
mean,
a vicious knockout, though. Regardless,
it was boxing. I mean,
yeah,
it was boxing, and it
that was
was.
another face first planting.
I'm not
Not
saying it's
quite
my
as
pick.
dramatic and vicious as Burchell the way he went down, but still, nonetheless, that was pretty dramatic
And
and not
again,
something I don't think anyone expected.
I think that we're talking about the motherfucking hashtag levels here, bro. Like the world. This happened. Oscar Valdez over Miguel Burchelt happened on a world class level, and I think that's what sets it apart from just about everything else. Perhaps apart from Donaire Ubali, but just about everything else is not quite there.
For sure.
Let's see what else. Well, I mean, I think that it's also fairly important. We got to talk about the upset of the year, because that kind of one of the bigger upsets of the year was one of the bigger stories of the year. And it essentially, I mean, it was like a never fucking ending saga between Teofimo Lopez Jr. and George Kambosos, to the point where it was a cool fight, great. Oh, it's fine for a stay busy fight. And then finally, before it happened, people were like, I don't care, just like get it over with already. And then by the time the decision's happening, it was like, holy shit. It turned into a totally different kind of Cinderella story. And on top of that, the fact that it happened toward the end of the year was so massive. So I think that the upset of the year has got to be talked about. And perhaps I just called it right now, but what do you think was the biggest upset of the year?
By that one, by far, absolutely, no question. Um, Originally, in the middle of, I thought Warrington Lara might still end up being upset of the year, but like you said it all, man. Cambosis, Teofimo Lopez, undisputed lightweight champion, no matter what the WBC or anyone else tries to tell you, and he beat Lomachenko. Like, not only did he beat Lomachenko, like he beat it without any controversy. Like he was riding high, man. No one, there was basically, even amongst all the young lions or kings or whatever you want to call the other small, studs of the lightweight division, Lopez was looked upon as like maybe even still a step above them. You know what I mean? And for him to lose to Kambosos, which, not taking anything away from Kambosos, he actually showed himself and put on the performance of the year probably with that victory. Um, that was huge. That was a huge upset. Lopez wasn't supposed to lose that fight. That was a mandatory defense. You're supposed to get out of the way. And the drama was, and the story for that fight was how long it took for him to actually get into the ring. The fight was supposed to be, an afterthought.
Exactly. Yeah, the overall arc and story or whatever of everything that happened before that fight actually took place was like, that's what makes it so absurd, and I think such a big upset, is that George Kambosos had to jump through so many hoops just to get to the point where he was given, pretty much, if you're playing by the quote unquote rules or whatever, what he deserved. He he wasn't like being really gifted anything. I mean, in reality, was he? I guess, especially if we're kind of doing a little crusade against the alphabet belts. But if you're playing within the rules of the fucking system that we have, which is shitty, but nonetheless the system we have, Kambosos was, this was his shot. Like, this was the shot that he earned and was owed. And so it wasn't his fault that Teofimo Lopez decided to do some dumbass shit and get positive with COVID. It wasn't his fault that this wound up being, um, you know, Triller entered the equation and kind of knocked the whole orbit of this entire thing off financially in terms of date and et cetera, and then wound up exiting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not George Camboso's fault, but regardless, he overcame all of these things. And it's not to say that there weren't other fighters who overcame some things. Sandor Martin over Mikey Garcia, you know, obviously on a different level, but nonetheless, Sandor
That was a
Martin.
huge upset too. That
Dude,
was
Spain had a great year, man. Kiko Martinez and Sandor Martin. I mean,
that was, well, that's another one that we should have mentioned for knockout
yep.
of the year.
Yeah, for Kid Galahad. I mean, Spain had a great year. And it just, again, the levels here are just slightly different, but nonetheless, Spain had a great year in terms of upsets.
Oh yeah, man, major bounce back. But yeah, Martin, Mikey Garcia, because Mikey Garcia again, even though he's not very active, he's still considered one of the big names in the sport, one of the premier names. And whenever he becomes active, there's a lot of buzz around him because people are always speculating about what potential fights he could be in. Because he's still considered one of the elite names, right? Maybe not quite where he was before the Spence fight, but he's still considered, you know, this was supposed to be a gimme fight for him. Originally, you know, he was apparently deep in negotiations with Regis Prograis for a fight that was supposed to be on DAZN. And that had a lot of buzz and a lot of people really excited about it. Then Garcia decided that, you know, he needed a tune-up before Prograis. And that's where Sandor Martin came in.
Famous last words, dude.
Yeah. And you know, and it's interesting too. The thing that caught my eye is that everyone has always speculated over the years that Garcia turned to boxing not so much because he loved it, it was because he was good at it, and that's what his family did. And that really proved more so than any time after that fight, because he was so nonchalant about losing. You know, he lost the fight. He was like, "Oh, it's no big deal. Lost one, whatever." It was, you know, he didn't give a shit.
Yeah, Officer Garcia, we got a 90-41. No, I'm just kidding. No, you know, I like Mikey Garcia overall. He's a very good fighter, but I think that he's obviously suffered from not knowing exactly what weight he can or should fight at, I suppose. I mean, and that's also a product, I think, of what is considered worthwhile, or, you know, the whole multiple weight champion shit. I would have loved to see Mikey Garcia at lightweight now. Like
well, that's where he should have been at the first place. You know, he got enticed to move up to the challenge Spence and others. I don't know, you know.
Which fine, like that's cool. You know, it's all good. But I would love to see a fighter of that quality at lightweight now among some of the fighters that we have there now. But now at this point,
yeah, man, he would match up so well. I would love to see him fight someone like Haney or Ryan Garcia, or you know, I think Loma still would trounce him. I always thought that when they would fight, but that would still be an interesting fight. Or, you know, or even Tank for that matter. But I don't think he could be able to like go back to 130.
Yeah, you ain't gonna get him to 135 now. I don't think you're gonna get him to 135 now.
So it's like you can get him to 140.
Yeah. So that's one of the big problems, is that he's now fighting kind of at a level where he doesn't really belong. And then, you know, being as inactive as he is, and not only inactive, if he's disinterested, dude, it's like he's just kind of collecting a paycheck, which is unfortunate because
because you know, no discredit to Martin. He's a good fighter and he proved his worth that night. He put on a hell of a performance. But if Garcia was in any type of really shape and really like exerted himself, I don't think he would have lost that night.
Yeah, and yeah, again, not to take anything away from Sandor Martin, because he scored a massive upset in 2021, but you do have to question Mikey Garcia's you know, quality there. But there were also a couple other upsets worth mentioning. Like, for instance, I brought this up to you before we started the show. Alicia Baumgartner over Terry Harper was a pretty big upset in women's boxing and in boxing overall, because a lot of people, myself included, were wondering whether or not Alicia Baumgartner was good enough to be able to sustain like what she did against Terry Harper, just outboxing her round after round after round and beating her down. I didn't see that happening. I thought it was going to be more of kind of like a war, you know, going back and forth. that wasn't what happened whatsoever. And
Yeah, she made
so
her presence on the scene.
yeah, man, kind of arriving on the scene, scoring a big win like that was massive.
And
So
she started now a rivalry with Michaela Mayer, which has been gaining a lot of traction on Twitter with all the trash talk between them.
yeah, that's good stuff, dude. That's the kind of stuff that
I'm all for it. I love.
it
I
sells
love.
fights.
Hopefully, they can get in the ring and do their thing. I mean, Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor is still the consensus like dream fight in women's boxing that everyone's kind of clamoring for, along with Clarissa Shields, I would say, against Savannah Marshall, maybe. Those are the two
Yeah,
big ones, right?
yeah,
Those
and
are
I
two
well,
big ones, at least.
Savannah Marshall was the one who she defeated Clarissa Shields in the amateurs, I believe, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so I think that a lot of people, and she's also visibly, she's good. You can tell that
Very.
she's,
Oh, yeah, yeah. And she's a hard hitter and she's well
yeah,
rounded.
she could punch. She's a good
Yeah.
fighter. So you can tell like that's got a lot of interest to it. I don't know what Clarissa Shields is up to, but obviously that's one of those kinds of fights that you would like to see after losing in mixed martial arts. So I think it sounds like she's kind of off of that and coming back to boxing, which is all good. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's obviously one of those fights you'd like to see. But Amanda Serrano, she's clearly one of the best fighters and one of the best women fighters around. So that's a rivalry that's got to
I
happen
mean,
too.
she certainly see how she transformed that poor girl's face in their last fight that she had.
Oh man, she's just on a different level than most fighters she gets in with. Period. So
Yeah.
that's good stuff. But I'd have to say I agree with you, man. Cambosos over Teofimo Lopez, the entire package of what he had to go through, the odds, etc., and then
And
getting in it,
the drama, the one that and that has the fight as the fight unfolded, because
the
again,
knockdown.
everyone's what Lopez said he was going to knock him out in the first round, right? He was running his mouth. All the heated buildup between both of them through everything that went through. I mean, you can do an entire episode. We can talk about 2 or 3 hours about all the BS that went down before this fight just to get to this event. With Lopez getting COVID and this one the sick and all this other stuff and Triller and their drama.
Trainers and fathers fighting
Yes,
and
fighters. It was a whole crazy mess. So to say that these two like were sick of each other, hated each other, just wanted this fight over with and wanted to get it on already was like, an understatement, majorly. So of course Lopez, comes out firing in the first round, and then when Cambosis dropped him at the end of that round, that was like that statement. Everyone's just like, oh, that was, it was the big thing right there. And that was like the start of the drama. That was the big thing. Everyone's like, oh my God, this is huge, because no one expected to see Teofimo get dropped. And that wasn't just a flash knockdown. Like he got dropped on his high pretty good. So,
yeah, you can, well, and he even got up like, okay,
yeah.
yeah. Like he wasn't getting up like, oh, come on, that wasn't shit. He was getting up like, all right, damn, you got me.
It almost reminded me, like, even though that this guy didn't get dropped, but remember when Nate Campbell fought Juan Diaz?
Yep.
In like the first round or so, Campbell whooped on him in a fight that everyone thought Diaz was gonna like swarm him. Campbell whooped on him, and at the end of the round, he looked at him and goes, "All night," something
Yep,
like that.
I remember that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, he was he put on like a inside fighting clinic. Honestly, I didn't think I could not stand Nate Campbell at that time. I loved Juan Diaz, and I remember watching that and just being like, "Oh my god, this guy is just beating the hell out of him." And yeah, at one point after like right as one of the round ends, he yelled "all night" right in his face, and it was like,
Yeah.
"Oh Jesus, this is gonna be a long
But
night."
that kind of like the same kind of same dynamic. Like Cambosis dropped them, and at the end of the round, you see him turn and kind of like mouth something to Lopez, and Lopez just kind of like, okay, yeah. But as you said, man, the drama that's unfolded was a really tough fight. That Cambosis was you can get the sense that he was ahead, but it was still a close fight. And then when he got dropped, what was it, around round 10 or so? When he got dropped, everyone kind of
Yeah.
figured at that point, I think, oh, okay, Lopez, tough fight, everything, but it looks like he's finally going to close the show. But no, and instead Cambosis came back and decisively, won the fight.
Yeah, I was, oh man, yeah, I was white knuckled there for a minute, just thinking, oh shit, man, he came so close, and now he's gonna wind up getting just bowled over here. And not only did that not happen, but yeah, he closed big in the 12th, and just he brought out everything he had, dude. You got to
Yeah.
give it to George Cambosos. And I don't know about all this rhetoric about what did he say? He said something like getting 80,000 people in Sydney. I don't know. Maybe that would happen. I don't know. I mean, I know.
Yeah, you always hear that whenever there's a huge. I love Australian boxing and I love everything like that, but it's always kind of the same thing that every time there's a huge win for Australian boxing, you hear the first thing that they're gonna that their first defense or the rematch is gonna be taking place somewhere in front of like 200,000 people in some stadium or whatever. I'm obviously exaggerating the number, but
yeah. I think it might be a little bit of an exaggeration in terms of the crowd they could. Maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe they
could. But they always say, yeah, we're gonna, I mean, Jeff Fennick used to pack him in.
That's what I was gonna say. It was maybe in the old Sydney Stadium when Jeff Fennick used to jam the. I don't know. Maybe they could, but either way, it does seem that at least for the time being, Kambosos' win has kind of like lit a little bit of a fire under Australian boxing.
And what's been good for him too is how visible he's been after the fight. He didn't just go right back to Australia and celebrate or whatever. Like he stayed in the States for almost like a month afterwards, it seemed, or a few weeks. Was ringside for a few fights, made himself known, everything like that. Was accessible to anyone who wanted to have an interview with him or anything like that. And yeah, man, he did and really built a lot of fans out here too who otherwise weren't that familiar with him. Like he definitely proved his worth. So
no question, dude. I gotta give it to him. I think that it's a really cool thing, and he's had a cool last little portion of the year because of that win, for sure.
Oh yeah, man. Yep. So good for him. He stood his ground. He didn't, conform when or give in when Trillo was trying to force him to have the fight when they wanted to.
Yep.
And
it was like a week and a half notice or 2 weeks notice.
Yeah, and everything like that. Dude, tried to force it in and all this stuff, and he was like, "I'm not doing that," and everything worked on its own. You know what I mean? Karma.
I was just gonna say too that there was that less so with Sandor Martin, Mikey Garcia, but it did feel with that too. Like there was just a little bit of like justice, karma, whatever you want to call it. Where like, I mean, like I said, less so with Mikey Garcia, because with him, it's just that he's just been inactive. To my knowledge, he hasn't been like a bad guy. But with Teofimo Lopez, the stretching out of all this shit, some of the stuff he said to the press, the cockiness, the way that he acts, and it kind of got to the point where it's like, bro, you beat Lomachenko. Granted, you beat him solidly, but that's like the only dude you've beaten, and you did have some difficulty. So chill and prove yourself. And instead he kind of just rested on his laurels, as they say, and wound up getting beat.
Yep.
So fuck it, it did have an air of justice to it, and it was fun. So since we just brought up a couple of women fighters, a couple of women's fights under upset of the year in particular, just going to ask you, who do you think was the best in women's boxing this year? Who was your fighter of the year?
I mean, I'm not sure if you consider her the best because it's altogether, but I would say the fighter of the year for women's boxing has to be Serrano for me, Amanda Serrano. I mean, she just she was active for one. It might not have been the top competition that we wanted to see her against, but the fact that she was active and the fact that she's teamed up now with Jake Paul, and regardless of your feelings of Jake Paul, he's obviously either love or hate him. Is a very that type of individual. People have a lot of mixed feelings on him. You have to give him credit for what he's done, for the work he's done with Amanda Serrano. She's, I believe, the first female fighter now who's been able to make over $1 million like the way she has. And she's brought a lot of attention and prominence to the sport. And considering that she's right up there being, if not the best female fighter on the planet, either 1A or 1B or something like that, people get to see women's boxing at the highest level with her, and more eyes get to see it at least. So yeah, in terms of all of that, I would have to say that was her. She did really good, man.
No, often Clarissa Shields seems to get a lot of the attention, not only because she's bigger, but she makes a lot more noise. I mean, she's just noisy in general in the sense that she's I mean, right or wrong, whether you like her or not,
Very, yeah.
she's very vocal about what she feels she deserves in terms of both attention, financially. So again, right or wrong, whether
Guys
you
like Jake
agree with her or
Paul and
not.
Clarissa Shields, I'm not comparing them equally, but like they have polarizing personalities that
Right.
people feel very strongly about.
Exactly. And so I think the last few years, a lot of the attention has gone more to Clarissa Shields. I'm not going to argue, but meanwhile, Amanda Serrano has been plugging along, has been continuing to win and maintained
She's
her
made some
position.
incredible records in the sport.
She
Granted,
has.
the competition is obviously not what it is in men's for boxing, but still what she's been able to do and the way she's moved up in weight and other stuff like this is wild.
See, that's the tricky thing with women's boxing. And while it is changing, it's kind of changing slowly, and we're not there yet to the point where there's a lot of competition.
Mhm.
But it's tricky to kind of gauge what this win is versus what that win is for somebody else if they're in different divisions, because different divisions have different depths and etc. But it's tough because with Clarissa Shields, there's not much opposition in her weight division, whether it's in MMA or in boxing, whereas Amanda Serrano is down toward weights that just have a lot more opposition and a lot better competition overall. But Amanda Serrano fought 3 times during 2021, twice defended her unified featherweight title, and on the third fight a couple of weeks ago, she beat the heck out of, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but made a lot of money doing it
Oh
on
man,
a
absolute bludgeon that poor girl.
oh man,
She looked
terrible.
like extra in a monster movie when it was done, man. That was just bad.
It was terrible. Like, whether you like Jake Paul or not, dude, and I'm not his biggest fan. I don't really like him that much. I'm able to kind of recognize that he's developed as a fighter more than a lot of people are willing to admit, and is probably more dangerous than a lot of people are willing to admit in the ring. But outside of the ring, you do have to give him some amount of credit where, like, if Amanda Serrano were getting paid what she's supposed to be getting paid, if fighters were getting paid based on their skill or based on merit, Amanda Serrano probably would have been getting paid more money a long time ago. But at the very least, what Jake Paul has done is raise awareness to the fact that, number one, women aren't getting paid shit. Number two, a lot of fighters aren't getting paid what they could be getting paid because of what's being taken off of the top, which is something that Floyd Mayweather also did did to and for a number of different fighters. And I mean, it's a totally different discussion, but nonetheless did happen. And Jake Paul is able to kind of push this conversation, at least for Amanda Serrano for the time being, into a realm where she's getting paid very well and getting paid what she should be getting paid. So, I mean, again, like him or not, that's big. And Amanda Serrano achieving that too, and being able to recognize that that's what she should do to make that money and get that recognition, that's also big. So that kind of, I think, in some way counts toward her being fighter of the year influentially.
Oh, for sure. You nailed all of them. And women's boxing in general is as healthy as it's ever been, going into 2022. It has a lot of attention. The fighters are finally getting the same amount of respect, maybe not financially, like you mentioned, but slowly growing. But like they, just in general, with a sport that's usually always kind of found female boxing to be, I don't know, somewhere of like a joke or like a sideshow. But now with all that stuff, and you see like these really like the skill level of these fighters now are not is not so sparse, but you see like much more of them around and the fights that are being made and everything. It's really good stuff, and it's really awesome to see how far it's gone and what's been developing. And with that being said, um, you also have to mention female fighters like Michaela Mayer, who had a hell of a year herself, um, becoming Ring Magazine champion, I believe, after her win over Hamadouche. Regardless of how wonky those scorecards were, that was still one of the best fights of the year, male or female, and she came through in it. So she's held in a high position right now as one of the top female fighters in the world. And you also have to mention her rival now, Alicia Baumgartner, who came on the scene with a huge victory, and again has been very visible since then, making the rounds, and has now entered a social media war, it seems, with Michaela Mayer. So along with Katie Taylor against Amanda Serrano. That's another fight that's to hope potentially and hopefully look forward to in 2022.
Yeah, Katie Taylor, without question, is another fighter who deserves to be in the conversation. I mean, it's a little tricky, and the only reason why I say it's a little tricky is because I think that she's had like the win against Natasha Jonas, for instance, was really good, but she's also struggled in some of her other fights where she's not won super clearly. And also, I got to kind of ding her a couple times for the voice. I'm, I'm just kidding. No, she's a very good fighter, and but I do wonder, and I think that this has kind of been asked among a lot of UK publications and stuff like that who pay closer attention, if she is kind of getting toward the latter portion of her career and how much her amateur career knocked off the
You can
potential
see it
time.
that she maybe slowed down a little bit. She has had,
Yeah.
and she's got, like you mentioned, she's had some rough fights as a pro. When I worked one of them at MSG, I think it was her first fight. That's one of the fights they mentioned. She didn't win clearly, but I can't remember the fighter that she fought that night.
Well, she's wildly popular in Ireland, and so I mean, it's if you're talking about influence, if you're factoring influence into it, she's going to be kind of toward the top of the heap for the picks of fighter of the year as well. But you mentioned Alicia Baumgartner. Her win over Terry Harper is pretty big, and Callie Reese also fought twice this year, but she also struggled in both fights pretty clearly, and also is probably reaching the latter portion of her career as well, because she's been fighting for a while, and she's also kind of entering. She was in an independent film this year, and she's also been stepping up and representing for Indigenous people a lot more in recent months. So she's also, if we're talking about influence, also is going to figure out into this conversation, but leads back to what you had just said, is that there's some clear momentum for women's boxing right now, which is good.
Yeah, I'm excited for its future. It's definitely come a long way from what I watched in the mid '90s when Christy Martin, don't get me wrong, trailblazer and Hall of Famer, and rightfully so, but just beating up women who had no business being anywhere, within a 100-foot radius of her, let alone a boxing ring type deal. You know what I mean?
Totally, dude. Yeah, and there are a number of fights still. What was it? I believe it was Sanisa Estrada.
Oh God, I forgot about that one. That was like
On, I think it was
that was just,
DAZN.
that was a televised mugging, or it could have been worse. That was bad.
It was like she landed like, I think it was one or two punches, and it was like 4 seconds in or something like that. And the lady,
she had no
done.
business being in the ring. Like, it was clear that she had no business whatsoever being anywhere close to that fight.
Obviously, these fights still happen, and they still happen on the level where it's like one fighter is really good and has no business fighting somebody who just can't fight. But regardless, they do happen. It's getting better, though. It's getting much better. So that's something to be looking forward to in 2022 as well. Yeah, I mean, I think that for the most part sums up the awards. There's all sorts of like micro or smaller awards, or I don't know if you want to call them less important, but one of the
like
things
what KO magazine used to do. Remember they would have their wacky ones where they had like all kinds of like.
I do. Yeah, because a number of websites started doing similar stuff in like the early 2000s. But I remember KO had a bunch of really good awards,
they had
like Crybaby of the Year and shit like that.
Tack Macatini Name of the Year. And then, what else did they have? Yeah, Comeback of the Year. This one, that one. They had a bunch of like funny ones too. Ken Norton Media Good Guy Award. Azuma Nelson Comeback. Yeah, Azuma Nelson Comeback. Oh no, Azuma Nelson Where Did He Come From Award, which would probably go to Mauricio Lara if you want to give that award to somebody.
Yeah, dude, there's well, I guess you could say who's trainer of the year, but as I said earlier, trainer of the year is generally going to go.
It usually goes hand in hand, yeah, with fighter of the year. I can't.
Why wouldn't it? Yeah,
exactly.
That's kind of it'd be tough to argue it. So yeah, it's probably going to go to Eddie Reynoso, who also, I believe he trained or was in Ryan Garcia's corner for
he was
the Campbell
for
fight.
The Campbell fight, yeah, definitely.
All right. So there's a little bit more than the Canelo going for.
Yeah, he had Canelo. He had that. He had Ryan at the beginning of the year. Not Chris Ariola, Andy Ruiz.
Yeah, that's right.
He's had, and Frank Sanchez, I think it is, right? So
okay, so fair enough. All right, so there's a little bit more boost to that argument as well.
It might be missing one or two. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of sums up for the most part the regular awards, though, unless we're getting kind of funky. But yeah, dude, I was super down. I was worried that this year was going to suck. I was worried that boxing was not going to be able to pull us out of the ditch, and it did. And also, I do have to say, this is kind of on the personal level too, because I've been able to enjoy bare knuckle. I mean, I've always, not always, but for a long time, have been a mixed martial arts fan, going back into the early 2000s. Been a boxing fan much longer. Boxing's obviously one of my first love or my main love or whatever. But in the last couple of years or so, bare knuckle has been able to kind of fill a little bit of a gap. And in 2021, it also filled a really massive gap. And on top of that, we've been able to enjoy it with a small cluster of friends, you, me, a couple other people.
And it's been a blast, man. That's
been really cool.
It's such a fun thing to watch. I mean, it's combat sports. It's not completely boxing or anything, but it's like, I don't know, the element of it, the way these guys just throw down, the fact that a few boxers who are at the tail end of their career, or MMA guys at the tail end of their career, thinking they might have a lifeline by going into this and finding out it's not as easy as they expected, has been pretty awesome. Yeah, it's been a blast. It's been a blast. And also seeing muscle-headed dudes get absolutely walloped by dudes who are woefully out of shape sometimes, but just know how to fight in general, is pretty amazing.
Yeah, between like for anybody unfamiliar and who hasn't totally tuned out by now, the second I said bare knuckle, there are two main kind of organizations for the time being, and that's BKFC, the Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship, and BYB Extreme, and that's the organization that pioneered the triangular fighting space in the last few years. Triller has kind of picked up the idea and run with it, but regardless, those are the kind of two main organizations for the time being in the US. And so, yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and it's been really cool kind of seeing it develop. And like you said, seeing people who have combat sports backgrounds and stuff like that going into it, finding out that it's like, it ain't the same is pretty funny.
Paige Van Zandt was probably the biggest name that's like tried to make the transition. And remember, there was like a big, they had a big press conference. She came in and challenged that girl that she was going to fight for the first fight and all this other stuff, and she hasn't even won a fight yet.
I mean, granted, they've been really exciting, and she's clearly shown that she's tough.
She can throw down. Oh yeah, she's very confident. She can
super fight, tough. Got her face totally wrecked in that first fight against Britton Hart. But I mean, it was like that. It was brutal, dude. It was brutal stuff. And another MMA guy, Melvin Guillard, got totally destroyed. There've been a number of fighters who are actual fighters who have gone in there. Oh, that was disappointing. Yeah. There've been a number of actual fighters who have gone in there and just kind of been taken aback by what happens in there. So it's a lot of fun to watch. In 2021, just kind of, yeah, dude, it could have been a lot worse than what it was. In a lot of ways, was pretty cool. So I appreciate you.
Considering how what was going on in 2020,
yeah, dude,
and how everyone was really very uncertain what's going on with 2021, and still we haven't gotten out of this. We're still deep in, obviously, with this new wave going on and other stuff going on in this world. We're not even close to being back to normal, or whatever you want to consider normal. But boxing, to its credit, really dug itself out of a hole, and was able to put on some really memorable stuff, some impressive things, all during a pandemic that we're all going through right now. So that being said, in what's otherwise would probably be another dark year, I would assume, for many people, including myself, boxing was a nice bright light. You know what I mean? With all the memories and different fights and activities and stuff that goes on, for sure.
And speaking of which, dude, like I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody who listens in. Everybody, there've been a number of people who have kind of listened in or watched on YouTube and have offered support and said, oh, I really love the show. It's a great show. You guys are awesome. And so I really appreciate those people because they've, at least for me, and I'm probably for you too, have been a really big help in what was otherwise a funky, stupid ass year in a lot of ways. But then
Oh,
also, you and I, Aris, have been able to kind of do some new stuff with the true crime, and some new history type of shit getting onto YouTube. So I appreciate that as well. Like I appreciate everything we've been able to do, man. It's been a lot of fun.
oh, it's been a blast, my dude. I'm always thankful that we've been able to do this for as long as we have. And like you said, man, we've been able to branch out into a few things and bring some stories to light that otherwise haven't been told in decades or whatever it may be. So, yeah, dude, I can't wait onwards and upwards to 2022. We have a lot of stuff lined up, a lot of exciting things lined up, and I'm thankful that everyone that listens to the show and enjoys it as long as that we do too, man, because this is a blast to do. I'm just doing it because I love the shit, not feeling that it's any type of thing. Like, this is just fun for me, and I appreciate that anyone else is passionate about it wants to listen in because I just love shooting the shit.
For sure, dude. I sometimes am just in disbelief that anybody could even. It's like we're basically just talking on the phone. So,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
anybody just kind of watching us or listening to us talk on the phone, because we sometimes just have these conversations apart from Zoom anyway, but it's a lot of fun. And anyway, I'm sure that we'll be back, Eris and I in particular, with some more stuff in 2022, whatever it is, true crime, recaps, previews, history, all that fun pugilistic stuff. But in the meanwhile, we're of course on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, we would be really appreciative if you subscribe there, or wherever it is you are listening. If you're listening podcast wise, go ahead and subscribe wherever that may be. If you're on social media though, like Twitter for instance, we're there sometimes. My buddy Aris is there at Punch Zone Aris. I'm there at Patrick M Connor. We're on Facebook, Instagram. I think that's about it because I fucking drew the line there, dude. Instagram's as far as I'm gonna go. I'm not gonna
I
do
gotta get a
any.
TikTok, Pat.
No, dude, I'm not. No, damn it, no. I'm not gonna. I don't have time for any more social media. They need to just make it an all-encompassing. No, don't do that either. I don't have time for that shit. But anyway,
37, man. I don't even know how to use a TikTok or what it is.
like I know what it is. I don't. I, I I'm getting to the age where I'm not gonna adapt to yet another social media. God dang it.
Yeah.
Dag nabbit. No, I appreciate it though, dude. And Eris, you and I will talk soon. As soon as we figure out what's going on, we'll let everybody know. And I appreciate it, bro.
Yep, absolutely. Happy holidays, everyone.
For sure. Happy New Year and take it easy, everybody.